What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. I am your host, Frankie D'Astoli. As always, excited to have you guys here. I am very excited for this episode that we're going to talk about the 10 commandments of problem solving. Before we kind of get into that, I think it's important for us, as I always do with most episodes, start with a little bit of Catholicism, start with a little bit of religion and faith. I think it's important for us to actually reflect on what the actual 10 commandments are. The 10 commandments were given to Moses by God. You could find it in Exodus 20 in your Bible. But I think ultimately we kind of just think of the 10 commandments a lot of times, and I include myself in this bucket. We think about the 10 commandments as kind of those more like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. And we just think like, oh, we don't do that stuff, right? Like none of us, hopefully are out there, doing any of those types of crazy things. And we think like, all right, yeah, we're in good standing. Like we follow the 10 commandments, like we're totally fine. And when you go back and actually look at the 10 commandments and you do what's called a self-examination, and I highly suggest that you do an examination of conscience every morning and every night before you go to bed. It'll help kind of keep you in line and keep you kind of standardized with how your day goes and keep things compartmentalized in a sense. And I think when you look back at those commandments and you actually dive into them, you realize that honestly, we do break that stuff sometimes. And again, you could find the commandments in Exodus 20 if you want to go through exactly what God said to Moses as he was giving him the commandments. But you could also look them up online. And I have the Hallow app, and I'm on the web browser right now, and they break them down beautifully in 10, just very digestible for you to reflect on. And one thing that, my wife and I do before we go to confession is we kind of look at the 10 commandments, and we also look at the 7 deadly sins, and we really kind of reflect on those things before we go into confession and make a good confession. So let's break down what the 10 commandments are. I think it's really good to just kind of refresh them, and we'll talk about them briefly before we get into the episode of the 10 commandments of problem solving, which if you're entrepreneurial, if you're in real estate, I think you're going to find a ton of value in this episode. And even just in general, right? Just in general with daily life things, I think everybody's going to find value on how to actually answer or actually how to actually solve the problems that you're facing. But let's look at the 10 commandments given to Moses from God. Number 1, I am the Lord your God. You shall not have strange gods before me. Number 2, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Number 3, remember to keep holy the Lord's day, the Sabbath. Number 4, honor your father and mother. Number 5, you shall not kill. Number 6, you shall not commit adultery. Number 7, you shall not steal. Number 8, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Number 9, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Number 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So let's break some of these down. I think we're going to start on the back half, right? We're going to start at 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's goods. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Remember something, guys. When God gave these commandments to Moses, the people of Israel had just come out of Egypt where there was this stuff all the time. I mean, like it was an absolute horror fest of what was going on there. People were cheating on everybody. People were taking people's wives. People were stealing from each other. It was paganism. It was an absolute disaster in the land of Egypt. So these people that lived there for, 400 years in regards to, kind of after the first Old Testament Joseph and what kind of God says 400 years passed by, they've been living in this pagan lifestyle for that long. So God needs to train his chosen people on how to actually live a honest and decent and holy life, right? So we hear those kind of back half ones. And even if we kind of work our way up the list, right? Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not steal. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not kill. Those are kind of these more intensified ones that were very common for the people of Israel, right? Because they came out of this paganism in Egypt. And again, like I said, God needs to really kind of revitalize them. But even still, these things in today's world, and today's world is crazy, as all of us know. I mean, you turn on the news, forget about it. It's all of this stuff, right? It's murder, it's kidnapping, it's trafficking, it's all of this stuff. It's just disastrous. And you just see those commandments, those big ones that are being broken. And I think when we think on the 10 commandments, those are the ones that we think about. But really, it's not those that are the ones that we're breaking often, if at all. It's these first kind of 4, right? So let's start at 4. Honor your mother and your father, right? Your father and your mother. This is one that kind of like sneaks under the radar a little bit, right? are we disrespectful to our parents at all? And me talking, I'm about to turn 28 years old. Like, still, like, yeah, my life now is a little bit different, right? I've done what God says to do, where leave your father and mother, cling to your wife. Like, I have my own family at this point, but do I really still give my parents the full respect that they deserve from me, right? Am I being a good son at all times? And I think that honestly I can improve in that case, right? Now, am I blatantly disrespecting my parents? No. And if you're listening to this, maybe you aren't either, or maybe you are, but it's a reflection point to think on, right? Are we doing those things? Are we being obedient to our parents just as the way God calls us to be obedient to him? Number 3, remember to keep holy the Lord's Day. I think honestly, we break, probably mostly everybody breaks this one now, right? And the reality is, and I said this on a couple episodes before, back in, before 1950, 75% of Catholics would go to mass on Sunday. You know what it is now? 17%. 1-7. That's not honoring the Lord's Day. That's not keeping the Lord's Day holy. To be a just person, we must give what others deserve, right? Justice is in regards to, like, if somebody commits murder, they go to jail. That's justice for it. It's not bad. It's not rude. It's not mean to put them behind bars. They committed murder. They go to jail, right? Just as, like, if you work really, really hard and you're grinding and you are, trying to show your boss that, you deserve that promotion and you get that promotion, that is also justice. If you are a real estate investor and you are putting in years of your life to build a portfolio to pass off to your children so that they have generational wealth, and that happens, that's justice, because it's what you deserve. It's what you've been due because of what you were doing. Exactly, right? So when it comes to the Lord's Day, when it comes to Sunday, it is just for us to give what is God's. And that day is a holy day. We need to give God ourselves that day. And we do that by going to mass. And we do that by being in a state of just, being in his presence throughout the day. And truthfully, and I'm in this boat a little bit too. Like, I go to mass every Sunday. I'm very, very, that's a big part of my lifestyle, my family lifestyle. That's an absolute no ifs, ands, or buts in this household. But after mass, do I always kind of keep God on my mind all throughout Sunday and do things that glorify him? Not really. Sometimes I'll go out and I'll go work and do certain other things, right? And I'm not necessarily saying like you have to be totally hands off, don't do a thing, don't even go to like a gas station or something like that, right? But what I'm saying is you need to keep that day holy. And that is the commandment. And that's what we need to be focusing on. So keep that day holy. Go to mass on Sunday and keep that a holy day for the Lord. Because as it says in Genesis, right? The Lord created all throughout those 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. It's a day for rest. It's a day for communion with God. Number 2, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. I mean, pretty much everybody's breaking this nowadays, right? JC. They're saying JC. Everybody's saying JC, or, for G's sake, right? Or, OMFG. It gets worse. You can go down a rabbit hole with this thing, right? But that's taking the Lord's name in vain. And that is breaking the second commandment. Understand that. You are breaking the second commandment when you say that. And again, I reflect on all these things, and I say it. I do these things as well. And that's why when I go to confession, I admit to these sins. And the first one, the very, very first one, I am the Lord your God. You shall not have strange gods before me. Again, people think like, oh, well, I don't worship a golden calf like they did, in the desert, right? With Moses and Aaron and all of that, and that whole situation. This is different, right? And even myself, sometimes I see this, right? Do we worship money? I think most people that are listening to this podcast listen for the real estate. They listen for the entrepreneurship, right? I think a good amount of you listen for the faith as well, which I'm very appreciative of. But do we worship money, right? At times, is money become a god to us, where we'll go out and we'll do anything that needs to be done in order to earn that money? And there's a difference between getting money to provide for the family that's entrusted to you, which I talk about a lot, but we do not put money over God, right? Do we put relationships over God? Right? Are relationships the reason why you're not going to mass on Sunday? Are relationships the reason why you're not praying? All of these things that we need to look at, right? What is before God? Because nothing can be before God. And coming from a husband and a father, I say this as well. It's God and then it's my family. That's how it works. It's what we're all called to do. Does it mean I don't love my family? Absolutely not. I think everybody that knows me knows how much I care for my wife and my daughter and my soon-to-be son and all of my loved ones around them. But it is God that gives those things to me. and I am from God. I'm his creation. He is my creator. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I love him above all things. And that's what we are all called to do. So reflect on these 10 commandments, because again, I think people just think, oh, well, I don't kill, I don't steal, I don't, cheat, I don't do those things, I'm not breaking those commandments. But it's really those 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I think for most of the people, that are good people, are decent people, we're doing what we're called to do, we still break those 4 commandments. And it's important to reflect on those, do your examination of conscience, go to confession, and keep those commandments in your household and on you and in your mind at all times. So that is the 10 commandments. We are going to get into the 10 commandments of problem solving. But before we get into that, we are going to take a quick note to talk about our show sponsor. Today's show sponsor on the Frankie D'Astoli Show is So Catholic. That's spelled SEAUX. So Catholic creates handmade scapulars. And as you can see here, if you're watching on the video, I am wearing mine today. And it is a St. Joseph scapular. As you can see, it's got the Sacred Heart of St. Joseph with the lilies. I'm very devoted to St. Joseph. And scapulars are a great devotional, devotional piece of clothing. I'm trying to find the right thing. Necklaces is probably a better word to wear around your neck. It's good for devotion to our Blessed Mother Mary. They're also for protection. It's said that if you wear scapulars, it's going to keep you out of hell, which is very, very important. Nobody here wants to end up in hell. And in truth, this is my first time ever wearing a scapular since So Catholic had sent me one. And I love it. And I didn't really think that I was much of a scapular guy. I'm a rosary guy. Obviously, I have a gold rosary that my beautiful wife got me for our wedding present, and I wear that if I don't wear my gold chain with my cross. But I put the scapular on, and I'm not taking it off. Like, I actually really love it. They're beautiful, and something that's even better is they're handmade. They're literally handmade. Amy sews them. She puts, her tender love and care in every single scapular that she sends out. And they're absolutely beautiful. She sent me another one too that we're going to give away at the next Rosary and Real Estate meetup, which I'm super, super excited for. We're going to have a date probably end of March, so keep an eye on that. But you could go to So Catholic, again, SEAUX Catholic.com, and you could get your handcrafted scapular, which is going to help you be more devoted to our Blessed Mother Mary. It's going to keep you out of hell, and it's ultimately going to bring you closer to Jesus Christ. Every time that you look at it, you're going to be reminded of the protection that you have. And you can use the code Frankie10 for a 10% discount. So go to So Catholic. It's beautiful to wear. They're great gifts. They're super, super well priced for handmade, beautiful scapulars. So I'm very excited about it, and I think you guys should be too. All right, let's get into it. So today's topic is the 10 commandments of problem solving. And this came straight from a book that I'm holding up here called Traction. Traction was recommended to me probably about in September of 2024 by this big time builder and developer. I was at a real estate meetup, and I had asked a question at the meetup to this guy, and I said, hey, listen, like you've clearly built a really, really successful business. You have a lot of stuff going on. He's telling us that he writes out like 1,000 checks a week. He's got so much stuff going on in his business. I was just like, how do you really stay organized? And at this point, Steve and I were really aggressively buying properties. And one thing that we didn't have in place was systems. We didn't have any operating procedures. We didn't really have any of that stuff. And he had recommended to me this book, Traction. And I immediately bought the book. However, shortly after that, I went to BPCon, Bigger Pockets Con in Cancun. And I picked up another book there that was kind of similar. It's called Scaling Smart. And I love the book Scaling Smart. It's from Rich and Kathy Fettick, I think is their last name, Fatick. I'm definitely botching that last name. But that's a really, really great book. And that's a little bit more of a real estate focused book. And I absolutely loved it. And I implemented a ton of stuff from that book. However, when I started reading Traction, I was very, very much hooked. And the reason why I like Traction a lot is because it breaks it down into what's called an EOS. It's an entrepreneurial system that the author Gino Wickman really created. And he brings this system to companies and implements it. And when I reflected on kind of where I am right now, I am no longer just a real estate investor. I am a business owner. My partner, Steve, and I, we run a legitimate business that's valued at millions of dollars based off the real estate that we own and is bringing in, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So when I look and when I read this book, I really relate to it on a system. We have employees now. There's a lot that needs to kind of go into it. And the EOS really, really helps identify those things. And I'll kind of just say real quick, like the 4 parts of the EOS. So the 4 parts of the EOS, let me see if I can get to a page here. Number 1 is vision. Number 2, sorry, just give me 1 second. Number 2 is people. Number 3 is data. Number 4 is issues. Number 5 is process. And then the 6th one is traction. So that is kind of like the EOS system. That's how it rolls. So every single part is broken down. First, you need the vision. Then you need to focus on the people, getting the people in the right seats. Then you focus on the data, what goes into it, creating a scorecard. That's something that I pulled from the book that's been really great. Then you focus on, what was it? I'm dropping the ball here. Then you focus on, after you focus on the data, you focus on the issues. Then you focus on the process. And then you focus on actually getting traction. So the book is really outstanding. I'm still in the process of finishing it. And the reason that is because when I'm reading this is not a book that I'm reading cover to cover. This is a book that I'm reading and I'm taking those lessons and bringing them to my team and implementing them. So I've actually been kind of grazing through this book over the past like 8 weeks and really kind of utilizing this stuff. And one thing that we're going to talk about today is what he calls the 10 commandments of issues. I'm kind of changing it up a little bit to problem solving because that's really what it kind of flows to. But before we even get into the 10 commandments of issues, I'm going to give you guys kind of a breakdown of the steps that he provides in the book. And I've written out these steps and I've shared them with my leadership team. My leadership team consists of myself, my partner, Steven, our property manager director, and our acquisitions manager as well. And we kind of go through this and we said, and I broke this down. I said, this is here on out how we are going to solve all issues. So step number 1 to solving all of the issues is get with your leadership team and air out all of the issues, air them all out, right? So me and my leadership team, we have meetings on Monday and Friday mornings. And the first thing that we do is we highlight wins. Like that's what we talk about. We say, all right, cool. What happened? And this past Monday, the win was we went a full weekend with no maintenance requests. And we were like, let's go. And then another win was we scheduled one of the 2 refinances for this week. Fantastic. And we just started hitting on a bunch of these wins. Then we say, cool, let's talk about the problems. What are the issues? And we air all of those issues out. So you got to get them all out there. And don't focus on just the important ones at this moment. Get them all out on the table. Step 2 is determine what type of issue they are. So there's 3 types of issues that are broken down in the book. Possible issue number 1 is what's called a VTO. So through the book, there's something called a vision traction organizer. And in the very portion of the book, you're actually going to fill this out. And it goes through your core values, your marketing strategy, your 1-year plan, your 3-year plan, your 5 or your 10-year plan, a bunch of other things that it kind of breaks down. And then there's one section called rocks. And I love the rock section. The rock section is the big things that you are focusing on for the quarter, right? So like one big thing for my quarter was get an accountant and bookkeeper. Right. Another big thing for our quarter is get up to an 80% occupancy rate. Another big thing for our quarter is, put together concrete project timelines and get with our contractors to make sure that those timelines are ensured. All of those things are rocks. Those are more of those bigger kind of plans that are going to take time to actually develop. You're going to have to interview accountants and bookkeepers. You're going to have to fill those vacancies to get up to 80%. You're going to have to create the timeline and meet with contractors to go over it. All of that stuff kind of goes into that. So that could be on the VTO. That could be your rocks. Number 2 is leadership, meaning it is the actual leadership that the leadership team that needs to discuss those particular problems. And then number 3 is department, right? So if an issue comes up, it could fall into a departmental issue. So like if, an issue pops up that conversion rate is low or something like that, that could potentially be something that is discussed on the leadership team, or it could be something that's just discussed with the department head and his sales guys, right? Something along those lines. After all the issues are aired out, you go through and you label what are those issues. Is it VTO? Is it leadership? Is it department? Step 3, number the priorities of issues starting with 1 as the top priority, right? So if you have 10 issues, cool, go through all those issues. What's the number 1 priority? Boom. What's number 2? What's number 3? What's number 4? What's number 5? All the way down to 10. Step number 4, I kind of adjusted this a little bit. I don't think Wickman actually said this like verbatim, but I said plan to solve the 3 prioritized issues. He might say pretty much just kind of go through the issues at that point. Mine was plan to solve the 3 prioritized issues. We're not going to be able to solve all 10 in that meeting, right? And if we do, we're going to kill anything else that needs to come after that because there's also important things that need to be talked about aside from issues. So plan to solve 3 of those 10, right? If you have 10 of those, plan to solve 3. If you have 20 of those, plan to solve 3. If you have 3 of those, plan to solve the 3 of them. Step 5, identify, discuss, and solve. IDS is how he breaks it down. This is what the meat of actually solving the problem is. The first thing you need to do is you need to identify the problem. And the problem isn't just what's on the surface level, right? So if the problem is, this tenant is mad because of X, Y, and Z. Let's just say this tenant's mad because they moved in, and this is a true story on mine, right? They moved in and the heat wasn't working. Okay. What's the problem there? What's the identity of the problem? The problem is the fact that the tenant is there and the heat's not working. But what's the identity? The identity is, well, we didn't check to make sure that the heat was working before the tenant moved in. Okay, let's back it up a little bit more then. Why didn't we check it? Well, because the pre-tenant checklist wasn't done. Okay, well, who's responsible for the pre-tenant checklist? Oh, Frankie's responsible for the pre-tenant checklist. Okay, cool. So now we know that the root of the problem is actually kind of me in that sense, right? And the realities are that's actually what's going to happen a lot of the times. Most of the time, the root of the problem is actually the person that is in charge of handling that type of scenario. And if you've read Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership, he says this all the time, right? He says 99% of the time, you are the one that should be taking ownership for all of those problems that are going on. And here's the beautiful thing. When you have a leadership team, you need to, and I say this with my team, I say, listen, every single one of us is going to be called the problem on some of these issues, and that's totally okay. That's totally okay. What's not okay is allowing it to continue to happen, right? So I have problems. Literally, I'm not even kidding. Yesterday was one of our leadership meetings. There must have been 3 or 4 things that I messed up on that I had to take ownership of, just as Steve did, just as my other teammates did as well, right? So you have to identify the problem. And it's not always going to be a person, but most of the time you're going to see that it is, and that's okay. After that, you need to discuss it, right? So then you start airing these things out. All right, well, why did this happen? Well, did it happen because, and I'm just using myself at this point, right? And this is not necessarily the case, but did it happen because Frankie has too many things on his plate and he can't go through the pre-tenant checklist before a tenant moves in every time? Boom. Now we have a discussion around the problem. The next step is the solving. Okay, well, Frankie's got too many things going on. How could we take some of that off of him and maybe share it around on the leadership team or bring it down the chain of command a little bit in the department and give some other people some different responsibilities who might be looking to try to step up and make a little bit more of an impact? Now you've solved the problem, right? After you've solved it, step 6 is you need to make the solution statement. The solution statement goes something like this. Okay, so we've identified that Frankie is in charge of running through the pre-tenant checklist before a tenant moves in. However, he's got too much going on. He's got his hand in the accounting and the financing. He's got his hand in the acquisition. He's got a hand in the refinances. He doesn't have the time to do the pre-tenant checklist. So we are going to give the pre-tenant checklist to Jack. And moving forward, Jack is going to do the pre-tenant checklist before every single property tenant move in and make sure that everything works efficiently before the tenant moves in. Jack, you're in the meeting with us. Are you on board with this? Jack says yes. Boom. That's the solution. That's the statement, the solution statement. Step 7, assign the action item to the person and add it to the to-do list and ensure that it gets done. Jack, congratulations. This is now on your plate. This is now your responsibility. It gives you another chance to jump in and give a little bit more of an impact to the company. Here's what you're going to do every single time. This is going to be on your to-do list prior to the tenant move in. And I'm going to make sure that you're obviously making sure that that happens. If you have any questions, you can bring them back to me. Boom. And that's it. Now that was step 7. That is it, guys. And I'm telling you, when I started implementing this with my team, we were significantly more efficient. And what I realized is we were constantly going off on tangents. It would be, hey, well, this was a problem with this tenant. Oh, well, you know what? This actually happened with this tenant too. Oh, well, let's talk about that. What ended up happening there? What ended up proceeding after that? Cool. How's that tenant doing, by the way? Oh, awesome. Yeah, cool. You know what? She said that she really loved our customer service. Wow, our customer service is fantastic. We should start promoting more about our customer service. And that's exactly how a tangent goes. And believe me, I hear this in my meetings all the time. And I started just like nipping it and like tangent. We're stopping it. Stay on the path. Stay on the task. And when you start doing this, you're going to start realizing that you're going to solve these problems and you're going to bang through those 3 usually pretty quickly to the point where you're going to say, all right, cool. Can we bookmark all of this other stuff? Or are there other ones that really need our attention? Let's hit on a few of those before we move on. So those are the 7 steps to go through to actually solve those problems. And the IDS, that identify, discuss, solve, is really critical. Now, one other thing that I'll add to this is there's really three types of issues. So before, when I talked about the VTO, the leadership, and the department, those are kind of three like categories for the issues. The three types of issues are these. Number one, a true problem that needs to be solved. Like there's an actual problem here, right? Like, oh, our lender said that they can't fund the deal anymore that's supposed to close next week. That is an actual problem that needs solving. We need to identify it, discuss it, and solve it, right? Step number two, possible issue number two, information that needs to be communicated and agreed on by the team, right? I'm trying to think of an example of this one. This one's a little bit more tricky to think on. Information that needs to be communicated and agreed on by the team. So let's just say like my acquisition guy comes in and he says, hey, like, I got a couple sellers that are, looking to possibly sell their house, but I don't really necessarily have an idea on how to comp these types of properties. I definitely need some help here. That's a problem that needs to be solved, but that's more so some type of like kind of information that needs to be gathered, right? So you kind of look at it that way. I probably didn't give the best example of that one. I'll try to think of some better ones on that. Number three, idea or opportunity that needs feedback, brainstorming, or green light from the team, right? This might be a situation where like, all right, we have this property here. I'll give you guys a true example on this. We have a 6-bedroom house and there's a discussion going on of, do we try to find a big family to rent that out to? Or do we try and experiment with a little bit of a different strategy? Like possibly doing almost like a rehab house, right? There's my partner, Steve, knows somebody who does rehab houses and he makes a killing off of it. That is something that needs brainstorming. That is something that needs a green light. And that's something that we all need to have agreement on the leadership team. Those are your three types of issues. It's either a true problem, it's information that's needed, or it's, a brainstorming idea that needs a green light. So that's how you want to go through the steps of an issue. Now let's talk about the 10 commandments of issues, or what I kind of rephrased it, the 10 commandments of solving issues or problem solving. Number one, and this is all from Gino Wickman, the book Traction. Number one, thou shalt not rule by consensus. What this means is if you have 4 people on your leadership team, it shouldn't be, all right, cool, let's take a vote. Oh, 3 people want to go with option A and only 1 person wants to go with option B. Sold. We're going with option A. As a leadership team, everyone needs congruency. You all need to be on the same page, moving forward as a united front. You cannot rule by consensus. That is one commandment. Commandment number 1. Commandment number 2 of solving problems. Thou shalt not be soft. Gino Wickman actually uses the word weenie. I personally changed it. My team was laughing at it a little bit too much. We changed it to soft. Thou shalt not be soft. You need to be able to make the tough calls, especially as the leader of the leadership team, right? That falls on you. So you need to be able to make those tough calls. And just what we were talking about, when you're identifying those problems, most of the time, those problems are going to be rooted in people. And you need to be able to call them out. And the leadership team needs to understand that that's okay because it's for the betterment of the company, right? It's for the betterment of them. It's for the betterment of the company. By fixing those problems, there's going to be more fluidity and everybody's going to make more money, right? And everybody's going to be happier. So you need to be able to make those calls. You cannot be soft. And that's not always on the leadership team, right? Sometimes decisions need to be made. We have to make decisions on evicting people. And that's never easy, right? It's never an easy thing to do, but you can't be soft because if you are soft in a situation like that, it's going to eat away at your company. Commandment number 3, thou shalt be decisive. Make a decision quickly, right? Do not let these problems become bigger problems by procrastinating them. Number 4, thou shalt not rely on secondhand information, right? Don't do something because you heard it from somebody else who's not even a part of the leadership team. Let your leadership team bring that information. Let them vouch for that information before you make a decision. Commandment number 5, thou shalt fight for the greater good, right? Remember, you have a company. You've built this company. This company, especially if you are the leader of that company, if you've founded the company, it's your baby, right? You fight for the greater good, right? Why do you give, like I was at the doctor yesterday with my wife. It was my daughter. She had her 15-month appointment and she was getting shots. She had to get 3 shots and she's wailing. She's crying. She's blue in the face. She's gripping on to her mom so tightly. She's staring into my soul, hysterically crying. Do I say to the doctor, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it? No, I don't want her to be in pain. No, she gets the shots so that she isn't in pain in the future, right? And she had a rough night. We had to give her Tylenol. She was, crying all night. She slept for like 11 hours. It was a long night. But at the end of the day, it's for the greater good of her health. You do the same exact thing. If you have a tenant that's not paying, the greater good of that company, for your company, is to get that tenant out, not to just like let it bypass and let your mortgage payments eat away at your profit. Number 6, thou shalt not try to solve them all. This is a big one that we talked about, right? Do not try to solve every single issue that you air out. Right now, if you air out 3 of them, yeah, prioritize the 3 and solve them. But if you air out 15 issues, don't spend one day trying to solve all 50 of those issues. A, it's going to take you a really, really long time, most likely. But B, you're also going to get fatigued. You're not going to make the right calls. Number 7, I love this one. This is one of my favorites. Thou shalt live with it, end it, or change it. Think about that. If you have an issue, you have 3 options on how to solve that problem. Number 1, you end it, right? I'm sorry, I apologize. Number 1, you live with it, right? I'm on the tenant, so I'll keep using the tenant, right? The tenant's not paying. Cool. We either live with this or we don't, right? Are we going to live with her not paying and just like letting the mortgages eat our profit, or are we going to end it? Are we going to, evict her? That's a possibility, right? To end the problem. Or are we going to change it? Are we going to try to put her on a payment plan? Or are we going to try to possibly, get her to apply for some sort of assisted living, right? There's other options there. But those are your 3. You either are going to live with the problem, you're going to end the problem, or you're going to change the problem. Period, end, stop. Number 8, thou shalt choose short-term pain and suffering. This is great. If you are in a situation where maybe you have somebody on your team that just, they don't fit, right? They're either not the right person in the right seat, or they're in the wrong seat, or whatever the case might be, or they're just not the right person in general. A lot of times this stuff tends to linger, and you don't want to have that conversation of like, hey, John, like things ain't working out, man. Like, we got to part ways here. You don't want to have those conversations. So you put up with it and you hope that things change, and nothing changes. And now all of a sudden the pain continues to come and come and come, and you're constantly dealing with problems from John. So you need to deal with that short-term pain. And that short-term pain, and Wickman talks about this, is like the 72-hour rule. It's going to suck for 72 hours. Them coming in, you having that conversation, that's really only going to probably last about 10 minutes anyway. Then after that, and then there's kind of like this little void of who's going to take over those tasks, who's going to do this, and John's upset, and you're upset, and you feel like you kind of let somebody down, or whatever the case might be. Usually it's about 72 hours, and then the horizon is up, and you start figuring things out, right? So take on that short-term suffering over that long-term pain. Number 9, thou shalt enter the danger. That's fire. I like it. Enter the danger. What does that mean? That means talk about the problems that scare you the most and get those out and solve those problems, because the ones that scare you the most are usually the most important ones that need to be solved. And number 10, thou shalt take a shot. Take a shot on solutions. Take a shot on figuring things out, right? Don't just feel like you can't move and you don't know what to do. Take some shots and learn from those mistakes. So those are the 10 commandments of problem solving. Again, I highly recommend the book Traction. I've pulled so much from this book into my company, and my company has been more successful because of it. There's hands down. I have no doubts about that. And I attribute a lot of that to this book Traction. I also attribute that to a lot of mentors that I work with. And I also attribute that to a great team that I have as well. But all in all, those are the 10 commandments of problem solving. Make sure you know your 10 commandments of life that God has given us, given to Moses for us, and really, really focus on those first 1 to 4 commandments, because I think a lot of us are breaking those and we're not realizing. So go to confession, pray to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, to our Blessed Mother, to Saint Joseph, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the flip. If you guys need anything, Frankie D'Astoli _REI. I'm answering all DMs. Feel free to send them to me, and keep an eye out for the next Rosary and Real Estate meetup. And if you are looking to become a member of the Order of Rosary and Real Estate, you do not need to be local to South Jersey. All you need to do is commit to praying 1 rosary a week and commit to the pursuit of real estate investing. If you are doing those 2 things, congratulations, you qualify to be a member. Reach out to me. You could DM me again at Frankie D'Astoli _REI, or you could email me at support@rosaryandrealestate.com, and I will get you enrolled to become a member of the Order of Rosary and Real Estate. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good one. Peace out.